Dennis Nally is chairman and senior partner of the U.S. firm of PwC and a member of the board of partners and principals and leadership team.
He was first elected the firm's U.S. chairman and senior partner in 2002 and re-elected to a second term in 2006. From 2000 through 2001, he served as the managing partner of the U.S. firm, and from 1998 to 2000, he was the audit and business advisory services leader for the Americas.
Dennis joined the U.S. firm's Detroit office in 1974 and became a partner in 1985. From 1985 to 1988, he served in the National Office Accounting Services Group in New York. From 1988 to 1992, he was partner in charge of the firm's Dayton, Ohio office. From 1992 to 1995, he served as the U.S. firm's National Director of Strategic Planning, and from 1995 to 1998, he was Vice Chairman with responsibilities for finance and key client service support, including technology and office operations. He was also a member of the U.S. Firm Policy Committee and the U.S. Management Committee, as well as being a member of the General Council of the Worldwide Organization.
He has extensive experience serving large multinational clients in a variety of industries. He principally is focused on the technology market, including computers and life sciences, clients such as NCR, IBM, and Bristol-Myers Squibb. He's a frequent speaker and guest lecturer on issues affecting the accounting profession and the U.S. capital markets. He has, for instance, spoken at the World Business Forum, the Detroit Economic Club, the Cambridge Energy Research Association Annual Global Energy Conference, New York University's Stern School of Business, Ohio State University, Duke University's Fuqua School of Business and the Coach K Leadership Conference, Wake Forest University's Hilton Lecture Series, and the Layton Lecture Series at the University of Illinois.
He's a graduate of Western Michigan University, and he's completed the Columbia University and Penn State University executive programs. He also enjoys golfing, boating, and has 4 children.
Thanks, guys, for that nice introduction. I really appreciate it. And let me just say thanks to everyone for coming out this morning. I know the weather's not all that great, and I know how it is on Friday mornings. You're probably thinking about wanting to be someplace else, but it really is great to be here at Notre Dame. I thought I would spend some time this morning talking about, with all the challenges that we have in today's world, what it's going to take to really be successful from a professional standpoint, and share some thoughts with you in terms of skills and what you ought to be thinking about as you prepare for your future from a career standpoint. But before I do that, I'd like to spend just a couple minutes giving you a little bit more background information about myself. In particular, why I chose accounting a number of years ago, why I selected public accounting, and importantly, what I've really done within the firm over the last 34 years, and then what it's been like to lead PricewaterhouseCoopers since 2002. I've been the senior partner now for about 6 years. So let me begin with why accounting. I was one of those individuals when I was sitting in probably your seats today that really didn't know what he really wanted to do from a career standpoint. I had an idea that I wanted to get into business and do something in business, and with some really good encouragement of my father, said that accounting would really be a great framework to really understand business. And so I started to pursue, my undergraduate degree in accounting, and it wasn't really until my senior year in college that I actually made a decision to get into public accounting. And that was really with the encouragement of one of my favorite accounting professors at Western Michigan University, Dr. Newbig, who essentially said, you really ought to try this public accounting stuff. And whether you like it or not, do it for a couple of years, get your CPA, and then you can probably move on to something and have a real career. Well, 34 years later, I'm still in public accounting at the same firm that I joined. And quite frankly, it's really been because over the 34 years, I really have had just a tremendous opportunity to do a lot of different things. I've had opportunities to work on some of our largest clients in the firm, as was announced earlier, and I've had an opportunity to work on some of our smaller entrepreneurial clients in a whole host of different industries. And from that, I've never stopped being challenged. I've never stopped learning, and that's always been what has kept me in public accounting. And to me, that's the real advantage. You see a lot of different things. You're working with some of the best companies, the best minds, dealing with some of the most interesting challenges that these organizations are facing. And it's not only professionally stimulating, but also personally rewarding when you can think about dealing with a number of clients like that. Over the last 6 years, I was elected senior partner in 2002. For those historians in the audience, that was right at the time of Enron, WorldCom, the demise of Arthur Andersen in particular. And I can remember getting a lot of notes from my partners at the time. Both congratulations on your election to senior partner, and equally important, why do you want this job? Condolences as well. The challenges that we have faced over the last 6 years in this profession have been nothing short of spectacular when you think about it. We've moved from a profession that was self-regulated to one that's been regulated under the PCAOB during this time period. We've seen just tremendous changes coming out from Sarbanes-Oxley and what that has meant to our clients and what that has meant to our people in terms of how we serve our clients. And obviously over the last, call it 8 months or so, having dealt with the all too familiar financial crisis and what that has meant to our organization as well as to our clients has been nothing short of phenomenal. So last 6 years, as a senior partner of this firm, have really been incredibly challenging, but also very rewarding from that standpoint. And actually has been a lot of fun during that time period. I still think it's the best job I've ever had, since I started work some 34 years ago. And I still get up in the morning every single day, incredibly energized and really excited about what I do. And the nice thing about my job is I don't think about it as a job. I really think about it as something that is just fun to do and love the challenges. And if I had one thought to leave you with today, it's find that one passion that you really love, that you're really excited about, because it really does make a difference, particularly when you think about a career that could span, 30, 35 years. Getting up in the morning, if you don't love what you're doing, if you're not there to really make a difference, it really makes for a long 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours or whatever the case may be. So I really encourage you to find that passion. So enough about me. Let me talk a little bit about what I believe is going to be required of each of you to really be successful, in the years to come, in terms of not only today, but equally important tomorrow. As this world becomes much more challenging, much more interesting, much more demanding, if you will, what is it really going to take to be successful? I think we're all familiar with the phrase that the only constant is change. Well, I couldn't emphasize that point enough, quite frankly. When I look back on our firm's 100-year history, I think we've seen more change in the last 10 years or so than we have in the first 100 years. It's pretty remarkable when you think about the challenges that we're dealing with. And to me, what that really says is the kind of leadership that's going to be necessary to really lead organizations in this demanding and challenging world is going to be very different than what we've seen in the past. It's going to be leadership who doesn't necessarily sit back and wait for the future to happen, but they really try to anticipate, what's going to happen over the next several years. Organizations are going to need forward-looking individuals, people who can look around the corner, who can look at the world and really anticipate the needs, anticipate the requirements of the future, and then really adapt to what's really take place. You notice I use the word anticipate and not predict. And to me, there's a real fundamental difference there. The ability to predict, while certainly, a great, skill or a great opportunity to do so, it's a gift that I think is all about having that crystal ball. And quite frankly, if all of us had the ability to really predict the future, think about where we'd all be, quite frankly. I don't have one of those, and I would suggest to you many leaders don't. Think about, for example, who could have predicted just 10 years ago the fall of Enron? For those going back to that time period, Enron was viewed as one of the top 5 global companies in the world. One of the most prestigious organizations to work for. The year before they declared bankruptcy, I think they were number 1 on that list. Pretty remarkable when you think about it. Who could have predicted 10 years ago the fall of some of our most prestigious financial services companies? The Merrill Lynches of the world, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, for example. Who could have predicted 5 months ago that our federal government would have been bailing out most of Wall Street today? Who would have ever thought that in today's world? Who could have predicted 10 years ago that companies today would be measuring their carbon footprint? Or that climate change, for example, would be increasingly a strategic, an operational, a reputational, and a compliance issue that many, many major companies today are really dealing with. Now, granted, maybe Al Gore could have predicted that 10 years ago, but I don't think any of us would have said this would have taken on that level of importance. And quite frankly, who could have predicted 5 years ago that the outcome of this national election that we just experienced, that we would have the first ever African American president? If we could actually do that, and we had the ability to make those predictions, think about all that could have been accomplished. Today, to me, what organizations are really in need of is leaders who can really anticipate the future and really help prepare their organizations to really deal with it. When you step back and you think about the last 6 months or so, think about if the leading financial services organizations that we've all read about, whether they could have been able to anticipate the consequences of what's really happened with the real estate bubble, the subprime issues that we've all read about, had they been able to make that prediction. Not only would they have been able to deal with what has unfolded over the last 12 months, but perhaps they really could have been in a position to actually have the consequences of the bubble, which turned into a credit crisis, and obviously has turned into a global financial crisis, which, as we all know, we're seeing recessions in major parts of the world take place today. What's very clear to me is that organizations that are really flexible enough to deal with the environment that we're seeing, those are going to be the organizations that will actually survive. Those will be the organizations that really prosper in the 21st century. It's those flexible organizations that are going to have unprecedented times in front of them that are able to deal with the changing environment. Think about Goldman Sachs, for example. Who would have thought Goldman Sachs 6 months ago would have been moving from one of the most prestigious investment banking organizations to becoming one of the more traditional financial services companies in that space? I don't think any of us could have really predicted that a number of years ago. The ability to adapt, the ability to change, applies to all individuals who work in and really run these organizations. More than ever, these organizations need people who are agile, they're flexible, and importantly, they're relevant to the organizations as they go through some of these gut-wrenching changes. Changes that are going to take place in the weeks ahead, the months ahead, and the years ahead as well. You know, it's interesting. Charles Darwin recognized this more than 150 years ago when he said, "It's not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change." The ones that are most responsive to change. And when you think about what we've experienced over the last 12 months, I couldn't emphasize that point more significantly. The way I see it, the need to master occasional change that we've all dealt with over the past 10 years or so, has really been replaced by the need to master continual change. It's just a fact of life. It's something we all have to deal with day in and day out. At PwC, our biggest challenge, the biggest challenge we have is anticipating the myriad of changes that we're seeing and then helping advise our clients on how best to deal with those changes. Not only here in the U.S., but also from a global standpoint. When you think about how intertwined these global economies really are, it's really pretty remarkable. You know, if you go back 8 months ago, and we started to see the downturn taking place in the U.S. economy, many around the world actually thought that this was just a U.S. phenomenon, that this was only going to be an issue that affected the U.S. economy. And today, when you look at this and you see recessions in Germany, you see recessions in Italy, you see slower growth in China, you see the impact of all of this it's having on business in India, you see the interconnectivity of our global economies, it's nothing short of remarkable. And it really points to the fact that this is all tied together. All the issues that we're collectively dealing with will even have more of a profound effect. We need talent that can help us deal and anticipate those types of issues. Just as the financial landscape is changing, as we all see it, so are the needs of our clients. And we need talent that's really able to address those changing needs. We need talent, quite frankly, that's willing to address new issues that our clients are dealing with, issues that, quite frankly, have never been surfaced before, and obviously being able to think creatively and help our clients really deal with those challenges. You know, it's interesting. Last week I was meeting with one of our CEO clients, a niche retailer, very well-known brand, dealing in an incredibly competitive environment. As we all know, retailers are really struggling today, given the economy that we're all facing here in the U.S. And we were having a conversation that, quite frankly, I never would have thought we would have had 12 months ago. We were actually talking about, in order to deal with the competitive economic environment, whether it makes sense for this particular organization to really begin to do business with what heretofore would have been referred to as one of their most significant competitors. How does this entity work with a competitor in a way that becomes a much more collaborative relationship and becomes much more of a win-win for each of those institutions? And the point of this is that it really requires a different way to think about issues and challenges in today's environment. And our clients are going through those types of thought processes that, quite frankly, they would not have had, 12 months ago. We need individuals that can really help our clients think through those types of challenges. We need talent that really is undaunted and, quite frankly, that are able to step out of their comfort zones and try something new, try something different, whether it's moving to a different business unit, changing clients, moving to a different city, or for that matter, even moving to another country outside the United States. In fact, I would share with you the whole issue of mobility as well as adaptive leadership are two of the traits that we most look often for in the capabilities of people that we bring in to PwC. That kind of leadership, that type of skill, is so important that we've really begun to identify those leadership traits at a much earlier age, much earlier stage in the careers of our professionals. For example, a Approximately 200 of our top U.S. college freshmen, sophomores, and juniors were selected to attend PwC's Leadership Adventure in Chicago last summer, a very unique program really designed to give advanced leadership skills so that they can either use on campus, in internships, and hopefully for the rest of their careers. In this past year, more than 2,000 students participated in our winter and summer internship program, which was rated #1 by Business Week last year. The grand finale, which is the intern development program, which is held in conjunction with the Disney Institute down at the Grand Floridian. This is all about developing leadership, developing skills, about driving and learning the behaviors that are really important to be successful into the future. Also, EPIC is another leadership development program at PwC. Through this program, our 2 to 4 year staff are given the opportunity to explore other cultures, other places around the world for 2-year stints, whetting their appetites hopefully for future international opportunities and emphasizing the importance of mobility for career growth as well as leadership development. And finally, to encourage responsible leadership at an early age, we created a program this past year, an international internship experience in Belize last summer that ran for 5 days. A unique opportunity that allowed approximately 100 interns, 17 high-performing staff, and 4 of our partners to really experience the impact one person can have in the life of a child and the dramatic impact a team of individuals can have on the lives of others. The project involved refurbishing 4 schools and included building a leadership development center as well as a new library and a computer lab. I can assure you that's something that we would not have done or even thought about 10 years ago, and it really recognizes the importance we place on responsible leadership. So a lot's changed. A lot has to continue to change in order to be responsive to today's environment. So at PwC, one of the things we've done over the past year is rather than react to change, but really to get out in front of change, we did some very, very extensive and interesting research to look at the future. We looked at how the world is going to change over the next 10 years, 2018 as we refer to it. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of the findings of this research, but I really want to share a couple highlights with you this morning and give you a better feel for what the implications of that research could mean to you. We know that the world is actually catching up to America by any traditional yardstick that you could use. For example, China's economy could overtake the U.S. economy in the year 2025. Think about that. The China economy could be larger than the U.S. economy by 2025. In fact, India's economy could supersede the U.S. economy by the year 2050. Also interesting, the E7 emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Mexico, Indonesia, as well as Turkey. They will dwarf the current size of the G7 economies as we know them today. What does all that mean? Fundamental shift in the way economic and capital flows are going to move over the next 15 to 20 years. We're seeing it today, and that pace of change will only continue. As a result, each of us needs to consider what all this will mean. Not only at PwC, but also you as individuals as you think about your careers and what that means to you over the next 20 to 30 years. Our understanding has to be more deeper. We have to have a better appreciation for how the rest of the world is really going to operate into the future. And importantly, how America, and as Americans, we're going to fit into that world. It's going to be a much different world over the next 20 years. We're used to an environment where America really dictated policies, dictated actions to the rest of the world. In the next 20 to 25 years, we're not going to have that type of seat at the table. We'll have a seat at the table that's much more collaborative, much more of an influencer, but not one which we can call all the shots. And that's a fundamental change, a fundamental shift than where we have been in the past. And each of us needs to think through the implications of that trend in terms of what we're dealing with. Another important trend we've seen. The rise of governments is an important source of capital to business. And when you think about it, this is really evident when you see what's going on with the sovereign wealth funds. In 2007, sovereign wealth fund assets approached $3 trillion. $3 trillion. And by 2012, assuming the growth rates continue, we project that they could reach $12 trillion. And when you think about this, even in the U.S., the U.S. government is now engaged in the form of sovereign lending, as the U.S. Treasury has really infused over $1 trillion into the U.S. economy over the last 12 months. Governments are clearly back in the game, back in the investment game, of intervening in the private sector to infuse capital and to promote stability in ways, quite frankly, that I think are going to be here for the foreseeable future. And when you think about this, this has really been unprecedented over the last 30 years or so. It's a trend that each of us are going to have to deal with as we look out into the future. And I would also share with you, I think we have become a little bit overconfident as Americans in our own models and our own institutions. Take, for example, the debate, U.S. GAAP versus IFRS. The world is clearly moving to IFRS, but relatively few American companies are really preparing aggressively for that transition. Now, there's no question in my mind that over time, IFRS will be the de facto global reporting standard around the world. In fact, when you think about it, today, more than 100 countries either require the use of IFRS or will require the use of IFRS in the next 12 to 18 months. So when you think about it, we could be the only country in the world not following that global standard, that global financial reporting standard. And if you link that thought back to what I said earlier about the connectivity of all of these global economies, how can the U.S. reporting standards be different or be on the outside of the rest of the capital markets? Now, if you asked me to predict where we'd be on IFRS 6 months ago, I would have told you that the train has left the station. That in the U.S., the decisions have been made to move down that path by moving towards IFRS over the next several years or so. However, the recent financial crisis has really overshadowed any real swift movement to the adoption of IFRS in the United States. And it's clear by looking at many of our clients, they are actually slowing down the implementation efforts to move towards IFRS. But when you think about it, how long can the U.S. have financial reporting that's outside what will be the mainstream around the world? And I think that's a fundamental issue that collectively we all need to be thinking about. So when I'm talking with our professionals, I pose the following question to them. How do we as leaders approach challenge and change? For example, do we duck our heads and hope for yesterday, hope for the more relevant time that we're all comfortable with, or do we proactively look to ways to turn those challenges into real opportunities? To turn those challenges into real opportunities. Well, to quote Martin Luther King, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience. It's where he stands in times of change and controversy. And I think that's a great message for all of us as we're dealing with the current economic conditions that are facing our country. So as I wrap up this morning, let me leave you with a couple thoughts and some advice as you think about your future and what your career may hold for each and every one of you. Number one, get comfortable with change. If you look at all what's happened over the past several months, to me it's just a foreshadowing of what's to come. Organizations are going to continue to have to deal with change. And they're going to increasingly look for individuals who know and can demonstrate how to change in that environment. They're looking for individuals who are agile, that can adapt, and that are readily open to dealing with change. 2, get comfortable with stepping out of your comfort zone. As a mentor of mine once told me, the minute you start to feel too comfortable in the job that you're in, you're no longer being challenged. That's the time you really know you need a change. Be willing to take on that new assignment. Move to another city, or for that matter, another country. It's all about stretching yourself, going beyond the limits that you think you can pursue, that you thought you were capable of. Bottom line, if an organization is asking you to do something differently, to move in a different direction, they have the confidence in you that you can actually do the job. Welcome that as an opportunity. 3, and I think an important one from my perspective, never stop learning. Keep your skills relevant. Be ahead of the game. Maintain a passion for learning and education. Your education clearly does not end once you leave this campus. In fact, I would submit what you're getting here is the foundation. Put yourself in the mode of continuously learning, continuously challenging yourself, and learning new skills. Bottom line, I think intellectual curiosity will serve you well into the future. And quite frankly, acquiring new skills, maintaining your relevance, will help get you outside your comfort zone as well. And 4, make sure you have a mentor. Somebody who knows you, somebody who you have confidence in, to have those open, candid discussions about your career, what you're dealing with, the opportunities in front of you. In fact, I will share with you, I still reach out to one of my first mentors more than 30 years ago. That type of advice and input is invaluable. Every one of us has a mentor, and I encourage you to really think about that as you pursue your own career. And 5, in everything you do, add value. To me, this is really a mental mindset. Challenge yourself to think about ways to do things better. Here's the way I think about the difference between a manager and a leader. Managers, to me, spend the majority of their time asking what has been done or actually checking on what's been done. Leaders, on the other hand, spend the majority of their time thinking of ways to do things differently, thinking of ways to add value, thinking of ways to challenge the organization to get better. And finally, number 6, and I can't emphasize this one enough, the need to team and collaborate with others is as important as your own individual performance. No one has their own answers. No one has all the answers, including yours truly. Just think about the financial crisis that we've been talking about. How you work in teams, how you share information, how you collaborate will be essential to your long-term success. Individual performance is great. You need to be accountable for your own performance. But your ability to work with others is as important, the way I see it, into the future. In summary, the way I see it, the future is yours for the taking. You can wait for the future to happen, or you can help shape the kind of world that you want to live in. And I'm confident that you will not wait for the future to happen. In fact, I anxiously look forward to seeing what kind of future you're here to create. So thanks very much for your time and attention this morning, and I'm happy to engage in any questions that you'd like. Thank you.
You touched You touched briefly on the timetable for IFRS change in the aftermath of the financial crisis. Do you think that it'll accelerate or slow down? And what do you do for PwC people and clients to sort of adjust for that change?
It's a great question, a timely question. Several months ago, I would have said that in the U.S. there was a clear commitment coming from the SEC to move to IFRS. They had actually proposed a timetable. They were going to begin allowing companies the top 100 companies to actually report using IFRS beginning in the year 2010. And then all companies would be required to file under IFRS probably in the time period of 2013 or 2014. So a clear indication coming from the SEC that they would encourage companies to move in that direction. They announced the timetable in the August time period. We've never seen the final rules, and I think that's an indication that at least at the SEC, they're beginning to slow all of this down. And it's a complicated issue. I think there's a real concern taking place around how those international standards get set. We saw I had some recent experience with Europe where different governments in Europe started to try to influence the standard setting process around IFRS. I think that's given the SEC a little pause for how fast they want to move to that timetable. You also have the fact that the current chairman of the SEC, Chairman Cox, will be stepping down from his position in January. And the sense we have is that he probably will leave the question for the timetable for U.S. companies to move to IFRS to his successor. So you have that as a variable that we can't predict. Having said all that, I really do think there will be one set of global financial reporting and accounting standards. It's just a question of timing. At PwC, we've actually started the process to begin to train our staff in IFRS. We're really focused on where the principal differences are between U.S. GAAP and IFRS. We're continuing with that training. We haven't slowed it down at all. We're waiting to see exactly what happens from the SEC. I think we'll have a much better feel for that whole issue probably in the March, April time period, and then we'll do a recalibration, if you will, in terms of how fast we're trying to train up our staff here in the United States to deal with it. It is fair to say, though, that when we look at our client base, a number of our clients who were really pursuing, the movement to IFRS, they've slowed down those activities. And it's a function of not only what's happening, with the SEC and the environment that I talked about earlier, but it's also, I think, a function of the whole economic environment and a real desire to get back to focus on those issues, those projects that are most important to really support the business. And if there's some uncertainty around the conversion timetable, they've sort of moved that off the front burner, if you will. So you got a combination of factors that's really influencing how we're thinking about that. Thank you.
Hi. You mentioned that flexible organizations are those that will most easily survive and flourish in times of change. What makes organizations more flexible, and how can we adjust our skills and our knowledge base to be more flexible and adaptable?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I think about a flexible or an adaptive organization, to me it's one that has a willingness or a mindset to be able to deal with change and be and to be receptive to change. Change for either individuals or organizations, I think, can be viewed as a real negative because it really requires you to do things differently. It's threatening. There may not be a clear path. There may not be a clear set of decisions that you'd want to make to deal with that. Concerns about making a mistake. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into making change a threat to either an individual or to an organization. And I think organizations that look at change as an opportunity, that embrace the positives of change, are going to be the ones that really are successful. And I think that applies to individuals as well. If you view change as an opportunity, as a way to do things differently, as a way to capitalize on a new business, a new set of facts, a new competitor, new technologies, and you use that in the positive sense, I think that flows through an organization that makes it much more receptive to continuously move forward and become relevant. I think the biggest challenge of organizations that resist change it gets back to a fundamental question of how long they can really remain relevant in this competitive environment that we're dealing with. And I think that applies to individuals as well. The ability to adapt to a new circumstance, to a new environment, to new challenges, all comes down to our ability collectively to become relevant. Relevant to the business that we're in, or relevant to our customers, clients that we're serving. And organizations that use that as a positive are going to be the ones that really are successful. And when you think about how global all of these issues have become, to me that's much more important today than what it was even 5 years ago, quite frankly, because you're not only dealing with the environment today that you think you have a good ability to deal with here in the United States. You're dealing with the environment with competitors and cultures that are so different. And so you've got to have that willingness to say, I've got to be able to move in response to that changing environment. And those organizations that can do that are going to be the ones that really survive, prosper, and will be successful into the future. Other questions?
How specifically is your firm adapting to the shift in economic clout? Like, are you expanding offices in China, or where will they let you practice? Where are the most strategic moves you make?
Well, clearly, our practice follows our clients. So when you think about where all the growth is, touched on it a little bit. Growth in China, growth in India, growth in Brazil, growth in Russia. That's where these emerging economies, are going to have future sustainable growth. So when you look at China, for example, China's economy is growing, was growing, double digits, GDP growth. Today is probably 7-8% given the economic downturn. But you compare that growth to the growth that we're seeing here in the U.S., which is actually negative growth. So our firm needs to be positioned to help our clients deal with where they're going to be doing business into the future. And that gets back to my whole comment around the need to have a mindset around mobility and the need to go where the opportunities are going to be. And as you think about your careers over the next 25 to 30 years, the desire to have that mobility be an important part of how you think about your career, I think is going to be really critical, because you're going to have to go to where those opportunities are, where that growth is, and that's a much different picture than what existed here in the United States, 10, 15 years ago. 10 or 15 years ago, the growth from a global economic standpoint was sitting here essentially in this economy, in the United States economy. So our firm is obviously investing heavily in those emerging economies. Those practices are very significant to the firm of PricewaterhouseCoopers. Our firm in China, for example, we have 7,500 people on the ground, mainland China, growing 20-25% a year. And I would say the same thing in many of the other emerging economies as well. So getting talent into those emerging economies is absolutely critical, because that's how we're going to service our clients into the future.
I know some global law firms would love to practice law in, say, India, but they're not welcome. Are there any barriers you're facing?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are barriers. The interesting thing about it is what's different, law firms versus accounting, for example, as you think about IFRS and the movement towards global financial accounting and reporting standards, that is creating much more mobility, and you don't necessarily have the limitations or the restrictions that a law firm might have when you go from, India to, France, for example. So that facilitates this notion of mobility. If you go back 15 years ago in accounting, it would have been the exact opposite. You would have saw China accounting standards, you would have saw German accounting standards, you would have saw French accounting standards. The movement to IFRS makes that much more easier to do business in. Now, that's not to say that a number of these countries don't have restrictions on the number of foreign nationals that will allow into a given country to practice. You still have some of those challenges, but it's becoming much more easier to move resources around to deal with the opportunities that are out there. Thank you.
Dennis, can you talk about the challenges of doing the right thing when the economy is good or when the economy is not good, protecting integrity and your reputation in these challenging times?
Yeah, it's it's a great question. It's easy to do the right thing when things are really going well. When a business is doing good and they don't have the pressures of making a quarterly forecast because the growth is there, the earnings on the bottom line is there. That's pretty easy area to deal with. The real challenge, though, is when things aren't going so well, and a business is experiencing its challenges to meet either the market needs or the market forecasts. That becomes a lot more of an issue to deal with. I think that's the hardest thing about, as you think about doing the right thing and protecting your brand and leading with integrity. Those organizations that do that, they do that in good times and they do that in bad times. They let the chips fall with where they are, and they have an awful lot of transparency around the good and the bad, and that to me is the fundamental difference. I think the hardest challenge you have as individuals is when the going gets tough, holding your line with regard to your values, your cultures, and defining who you are as individuals and as organizations. And quite frankly, we're seeing that today. A lot of these financial services companies are really under immense pressure to deal with challenges that they never saw before, and some are doing that incredibly well, and others are really struggling with how to balance the needs of the demands on them short term versus long term. So I look at it as it's easy to do the right thing in good times. I think it's incredibly challenging to do the right thing when you're really having difficult times, and that's why the notion of your values and what you believe in and what you stand for is really important, particularly in this type of an environment.
Dennis, you made reference that you feel that governments are going to become more involved in the economy, and that based on that, do you interpret that to be an increase in governmental regulation, and how is that going to affect the fundamental principle of capitalism?
Yeah, I think most definitely, you can see more governmental regulation coming. I was talking with some this morning. It's amazing to me how connected regulators are today on a global basis. If you go back 5 years ago, you'd have the regulators in the U.S. dealing with issues. You'd have the regulators in Germany dealing with issues. You'd have the regulators in Singapore dealing with issues. They wouldn't be talking. They wouldn't be connected. And today, I will tell you that those regulators, while not one regulator, they are as connected in their thinking around how to deal with these issues and challenges as I've ever seen before. So I do think you're going to see a lot more regulation coming. It's going to start in the financial services arena, for example. I think you'll see the major financial institutions that are surviving here in the U.S., the the J.P. Morgan Chases, the Bank of Americas, the Wells Fargos, those major financial institutions that appear to be surviving the crisis, I think you'll see more intense regulation around what those institutions can do, and equally important, what they can't do. I also think you'll see a lot more regulation on entities that have not been regulated in the past. So, for example, hedge funds who've had a pretty much a clean sheet of paper to do business and operate the way they want. I think you'll see a lot more regulation coming from that standpoint. So more regulation, certainly in financial services, more regulation that's connected from a global standpoint in terms of the kinds of things that you can do in the UK versus Germany versus the US. And I think that's going to be an environment that we're going to have to deal with here for the foreseeable future. Hard to predict exactly what that regulation will entail, but I think we'll have a pretty good feel for it over the next 6 months.
Thank you for coming today. Sure. You talked a little bit about the infrastructure that was developed in Belize, and PwC is known as a leader in corporate philanthropy. Could you talk a little bit about how that benefits PwC itself and the society, and is that a part of adding value to the company, and do you think that will be put aside in the challenging economic times?
Yes, the Project Belize effort. First time we've actually done something like that outside the U.S. We've done similar types of projects within the U.S. But from our perspective, it really accomplishes a couple different things. Number one, it really is a way that the firm can give back to different communities to deal with issues and challenges that they're facing. So it's a philosophy that we have at PwC. We think it's very important to give back and to help either organizations or individuals in a way that they otherwise would not have experienced before. So that's a commitment at the firm-wide level. I think the other real benefit, quite frankly, is for our people. We really encourage our people to be involved with communities, to be active, to participate, and it's a statement to our people that we're really serious about, their involvement in a number of these activities. Quite frankly, that's easy because a lot of the folks we hire, that's their mindset to begin with. So it's reaffirming the firm goal of what we're trying to get accomplished, and then really encouraging, our people through real live experiences and actions to do the same. And so it's those would be the two principal benefits as we see it. We think business has a fundamental obligation to give back. We're successful. We've got a lot of very positive things going on, and this is not just about business per se. This is about making our communities better, helping people, achieve their goals, aspirations, and by working with different organizations and institutions, we think that's a very positive way to signal what this firm is all about. So it's just not about good audits, good tax returns, and good consulting. This is all about, how we make our communities better than what they are today. Glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Small party gift here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. Great. Thank you.
And I would remind the students, make sure that you turn in your blue cards, and we have one more talk next week. For those of you that are going to the lunch, please come forward.